Hi everyone, it's Donna from Smokealicious in Olean, New York in the United States of America. And today we're introducing you to prime rib. So let's get into just a little bit of discussion about prime rib first so you have a better understanding of the name. We're going to be doing a grilled version of our prime rib. And prime is basically a USDA classification for our meat. So we do prime, choice, and select. And today I have a bone-in prime rib that is USDA choice. I could not get the prime level. They're very hard to find. But mine is an Angus cattle, which is a premier cattle range. Now for prime rib, in order to be classified as prime, this is a cattle that is between 9 and 30 months of age. Most are butchered a little bit younger, around no more than 2 years of age. And it refers to the meat's marbleization. So all the intermuscular fat that you see, the more marbled it is, the more it goes up in that USDA rating. So we are going to be taking our 3 bone-in rib, prime rib, and we're going to be introducing this to the grill with some wood chips for extra flavor. That's going to make it extremely tasty. So join me as we get ready to get this prepared for the grill. So the first step with our prime rib before we can introduce it to the grill is we're going to need about 24 hours to do what is called a brine. Now we are simply using salt for our brine. We don't need anything else because this is a premium cut of beef. Now my prime rib has come with a net done because the butcher has already done some preparation to this. But I always find that the butcher doesn't quite trim the meat to the degree that I want. So I will be removing the net. And I don't really hold on to the net for the grilling part because it's really not necessary. If you need to, you can actually use some meat twine and tie this up. But as you'll see on my meat, there is still some sizable areas of fat. And you have to remember that smoke vapor does not penetrate fat. So I am going to want to do a little bit of trimming on top of what the butcher has already done. So any areas that are thicker, I'm going to go ahead and just start to trim off that additional fat. I want to be as close to the meat as I possibly can, just so that I get the best flavor. So you do need to be careful because, as I said, this is a premium cut. You don't really want to take away any meat. We just want to be able to get as close to the start of the meat for the grilling. And that will allow all of our wood chips, when they start to smolder and release their essence, that's going to allow for the best flavoring to infuse into our meat. Now, where you have the ribs, where the ribs have their tail, that's going to be the thickest chunk. So I do tend to do a little bit of like a V cut, and I take out that section. I just don't really need this amount of fat introduced onto my grill. So you'll see that now I've got kind of a nice sheen, and that is what's called silver skin. And silver skin is something that can be a little chewy if you don't remove it. So even on a prime cut of meat, you definitely want to try to get as much of this silver skin off as you can. And the key for silver skin is to kind of insert your knife underneath and then using your fingers. And oftentimes I keep a paper towel or a regular towel handy to help me with the pulling part of it. On prime or a choice cut of beef, it's usually not that difficult. You can really get a hold of it pretty well. So taking off the silver skin is going to ensure an even better flavor and taste experience. You're going to have a much better texture to the meat when it's done. And because we're going to want to do a little bit of a direct searing on this, we want to actually be able to keep all of that skin off. So you can kind of see where there's going to be a little bit left that we don't have to worry too much about, but we do want to get rid of more of the fat. Then once we do that, our brine is very, very simple. And to make this a really, really moist piece of meat, piece of beef, we are going to just salt it. Salt, what it will do is start to interact with protein and the collagen in the meat, and that will start to release the extra flavor and moisture. It'll actually make it extra moist. So I'm just going to take this last little bit. Okay, and so that's a pretty well trimmed, and you can see it's still sizable. There's still quite a bit of fat, even though the butcher will come in and have done that ahead of time. So now when it comes to salt, how much do you need? Well, roughly a half teaspoon per pound of meat. So mine is just about 5 pounds. I really prefer to cook about 8 pounds, but again, this is a prime cut, and that means they're hard to find. So you just take the salt and you start to sprinkle it on all surfaces of the meat, and you want to make sure it's well coated. And oftentimes people will say, oh, it's got to make the meat so salty, it's going to be so terrible. It doesn't. Once you put this in the refrigerator and it goes through its brining process, it does not get a salty taste to it. It actually just helps with the moisture level. And anytime you're concerned about extra sodium, you can wash your meat after it's been brined. You can wash off the exterior if you want to be sure. This is like a traditional method when you do a brining on pork belly, when you make your own homemade bacon, which at some point we'll probably do to demonstrate to you. That is something that has an excessive amount of salt that you do want to make sure you rinse off. So I am at the bone level now. And again, I don't trim off on the bones because we do need those for cutting the ideal servings, but we want to make sure that that gets well salted too, because the bones just provide so much great flavor, and you will want to hold on to those bones once you're done. They make for great bone broth. So we're just going to make sure that that's all rubbed in well. And again, you can see where I am just about at the end of my salt here. Okay, and so once that is all completely salted, you'll just want to take a some type of a non-interactive container, and I prefer to use just plastic bags. They do the best job of just a marinating, brining kind of container. And just slide your pre-salted meat into the bag. And then the key is going to be to try to remove all the excess air. We don't want a lot of oxygen in to oxygenate the meat. We don't need it. We want the salt to do its job. So I start to remove the air, and then as I get closer to the final seal of the bag, I just make sure that I've really cinched it. And then this is ready for the fridge. So this will brine for 24 hours. Then we'll take it out and we're gonna put a dry rub on next before it goes to the grill. It's been 24 hours that we've had our prime rib in the refrigerator brining with just salt. So now it's time to prepare the dry rub that we'll be putting on top of that roast. So to start off, we're gonna have some fresh rosemary, and this is about 2 tablespoons. Then we're going to use some crushed rosemary or chopped, and that's about, just about a teaspoon. 2 tablespoons of fresh ground black pepper. And as you see, everything is going into my mortar and pestle because that's how we're going to combine everything. We have some dried oregano. It's about a teaspoon. Garlic powder. Paprika. Onion powder, and prepared horseradish. Now the prepared horseradish is what's going to provide pretty much our liquid base to this, but just know you should have a little bit of water on hand just in case, and then just a dash or a pinch of chipotle chili pepper. Then we're going to combine this. And this is going to become a dry rub. So despite there being a little bit of liquid to our horseradish, this is in essence a coarse, dry rub. So just want to make sure everything gets well combined. And I prefer to leave my rosemary that is in its fresh form whole. I don't want to really crush that down. Rosemary and beef are one of the best combinations from a flavor standpoint, so I don't want to crush those. We've already got some crushed rosemary in there, so that is plenty for the crushed part of it. Once it's combined, and I kind of like my consistency, as you'll see, it kind of holds together on its own. That's kind of what you're looking for. We're going to let the moisture of the meat kind of bind with it. So once we have that all mixed up, we've removed our prime rib, 3-rib roast from the refrigerator. And as you can see, there's a little bit of condensation in the bag, which is great to see. That means that our meat has tenderized wonderfully over the past 24 hours. And you can see the difference in texture when I touch it. You'll see that it has a slow comeback, and that means that we have put in some moisture into the inside of our roast. So now what I'm going to do, I'm starting with the non-bone side first. I'm just going to take my hand and I'm generously rubbing my dry rub into the meat. And this is going to act as the flavor infuser along with our wood on the grill. So we start with the meatiest side, and then you'll want to start flipping it and do the sides. And if you find that you're losing some of your consistency of your rub, you can add a little bit of water, but you can see all that fresh rosemary that's clinging. And we just want to make sure we get that nice and even. Do the other side before you go to the bone side. And this is what's known as a char crust, because we've added an element that has a liquid form in addition to dry ingredients. And now I'm going to do first the top section where the ribs actually meet with the majority of the meat. Bringing it down over the rounded top. And then last, you should be doing your bones. And yes, please do the bones. We want, as I had mentioned before, we want to try to savor the flavor that comes from the bones as well. And if you're going to end up saving those bones at all for bone broth, we want that added flavor in there. So just make sure it's well coated. And I usually go back to my original start and make sure anything that might have fallen off on the meat portion gets replenished. And that's it. This is all it takes. You do not have to wait for any marination on this. This is ready to go. So the next step for us is going to be to get this ready for the grill. We're going to go out, get our grill set up, and we are doing a slightly different grill setup today, so we will discuss that when I meet you outside. Okay, here we are at the grill, and I will show you that it is not the best grilling day, but we grill in America at any time of the year. So we're in between storms right now, and we are due for a warm-up. So today I've lit up our gas-fired grill, and this is a grill that allows me to use a smoker box on it. So what I've done is I've pre-set up my grill with a water pan, and I've also put our Bry Blend wood chips and a couple of wood chunks, which we're hoping to introduce to you in South Africa during 2022. So what I've done is still set up a 2-zone cooking method. I've turned on 2 of my 4 burners only on one side, put my smoker box on that with my wood products, and then included my water pan with some warm water. And as you can see, that is already steaming. That's already nice and hot. So now the only thing that's left to do is take our prime rib. Now I'm electing, because of our weather, to go ahead and put my prime rib on the disposable pan with a rack, with a roasting rack. And that just keeps my meat elevated so that all of the heat can circulate around it. You can see that my wood chips are smoking nicely. So we are going to close this up and allow this to go. I have inserted a instant read thermometer. Please make sure when you use these that you have an all metal thermometer, that there is no plastic wrap around it or you will lose it. I've inserted it so that the probe end is halfway through my meat, and that will wait until it has a registration of 110 to 115 Fahrenheit for degrees, and that will be when we want to pull and rest our meat. We will be doing a searing technique on this as well. So for now, we're closing it up. We're leaving it at about 225 to 275 degrees Fahrenheit, and we'll be back to take a look at it. Okay, so we're having a little bit of a thaw out today, so you are going to hear the dripping of the snow melting off of the roof line. But we're at the point now where our roast has reached 115 degrees internal temperature, so we're ready to do a searing technique. So I'm going to first remove my smoker box, as we're done with that for now. And I've taken out the thermometer, because we won't need to use that either. And I'm going to just now take my roast out of the pan, and I'm going to place it on its side over the direct heat. And you'll hear that sear right away. What we want to do is just have a couple of minutes on each side to do a nice crusty sear on the outside. So my heat is up to high on my 2 burners that are lit. Remember, we cooked in direct 2-zone method, which meant there are no burners lit on the side that we had done our roast until we got to the searing spot. And you can see where it just forms a nice little crust on the outside. We're getting a little help from our dripping too to keep our flaming going. And if you should get flames like that where there's a lot of rendering of the fats, just go ahead and turn it a little bit more frequently. Mine's looking pretty good on its own. And you'll see that I did not net it or do any tying, and my rib roast stayed together just fine. So, and you want to make sure that you do all sides, and that includes even the butt end. And the bone side. And this will just complete the process of maintaining all the nice moisture that we have inside. And then that's it. We're going to remove it and let this rest for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll be ready to serve. Okay, so we've let our prime rib roast that we've put on the grill rest for about 10 minutes, and it's now time to do a little bit of carving. I did a little pre-slice just to make sure. This was roughly 2 hours for my roast, and it's just perfectly done. There's no question about it. Now you will see that where we left a little bit of that fat, that just helped to keep all of our dry rub attached, and it also kept our salt tenderizing on the inside. And you can just see it is just massively tender. I mean, there is no question this will be an ideal piece of meat for that special occasion. So as normal, it's time for our sampling, and Angela will be doing the honors. But you know, it is prime rib. So,
oh my gosh, that is so good. Very tender. Like the rosemary. The rosemary is really good.
yes, and I'm sampling on the other side of the camera.
Very good.
Well, there you have it. Our rosemary crusted prime rib roast that has been grilled and then unseared. Always remember that you don't have to start your rib roast with a sear. You can end as well. Perfectly cooked. We've reached our internal temperature of 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which is ideal for beef, with just a slight 10-minute rest. So we'll be meeting you in the kitchen next time. It's Donna at Smokin'Licious and Angela, and we are wishing you great cooking.